What's up guys, T here. Today I'm going to run through and break down the different ship types as well as give you guys their greatest strength and greatest weakness so you guys have a little better understanding of how to use them in different circumstances and how to use them to customize your own fleets. And without further ado, here we go. For destroyers, their greatest strength is going to be their sub-detection and then their depth charges. So that makes them the best at combating enemy submarines. The greatest weaknesses of them is they have absolutely, well, not can't say none, but little to no naval firepower, as well as range, no anti-air. They're really just little ships specified to run and hunt down submarines. A little extra perk is they have decent surface detection, and another thing to realize is that they are actually pretty hard to detect for enemy ships with a surface visibility of 10. That's the lowest of any of the ships, except for some of the modern submarines, but that plays a little bit differently for them since they're not at the surface most of the time. Another nice stat of theirs is their evasion is really high, so that's going to give them the ability to actually dodge the incoming salvos of some of the larger ships when they're in combat. Next is the light cruisers. So their greatest advantage is actually their combination of firing range with evasion or speed, as well as firepower. Another nice thing to point out with them is they have decent anti-air for their ship size. You'll see the greatest anti-air on the battleship models, but especially at the 1936, their anti-air runs 1 point lower, so it's 10 to 9 with the battleship models. So that's actually really nice to get more anti-air for a low production cost. So they're basically a modified destroyer, I would say. They still detect subs and they still have depth charges as well as the torpedo attack, but they're not as good at that. What they change that out for is the anti-air and the naval firepower. A cool thing about them though is they're still pretty hard to detect for enemy ships, 15 being the standard visibility across all models. The other thing that their greatest strength, bringing to their greatest strength, guys, is that their surface detection. So they are actually really good. They're the best ship at detecting enemy ships on the surface. It's a little bit lost on the 1936 version, probably due to the game emulating lack of mobile radar systems on or sonar on the ships. But when you get to the 1944 versions of the 1940, they have the best surface detection. So they're going to be your spotters for your Navy, essentially, is what they're going to operate as. The next class is the heavy cruiser class. This is basically just, as it sounds, a revamped version of the light cruiser. And what they do is they take out the surface, the detection ability. They make them bigger, easier to see. They can't find subs. They're not good at engaging subs. But what they have is the ability to shore bombard to start with. Considerably more naval firepower and considerably more range. So they're going to be that in between the light cruiser destroyer and then in between that and your full battleship. And that's kind of really just their strength, is they're easy to make, but they can still engage at a decent standard. They're going to be able to eliminate your lighter cruisers, your destroyers, as well as make holes in some of the larger capital ships if need be. No, they won't be able to engage head on head, but they're going to be able to hold some punch and actually do some stuff for you. A thing to note is that even though their speed's still high, their evasion is actually quite low. So they're not going to be able to move around as quickly and evade as much large shells when engaging in combat. But they are going to have that higher evasion than the battleships, which is like 12. So they're going to still be able to keep up with and track some of those smaller ships like the light cruisers. The next is the battle cruisers, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, guys, because in honesty, this is kind of a lost ship if you're playing one of the powerhouses. The only reason to really build this ship is if you don't want to do battleships, which is kind of silly because battleships are a lot better. They take everything that's good about a heavy cruiser and everything that's good about a battleship and try to combine them, but what you end up is a worse version of both. So if you're going to do a full-on capital fleet, or even any other fleet, honestly, you'd rather just stick with one or the other and go for the better versions of one or the other and use it more tactily than try to just get a hybrid that's not quite good at either. It's just okay at both. And then battleships, these are going to be obviously your, capital ships. They're going to be your great firepower, your shore bombard. Their basic greatest advantage is going to be they have the biggest guns for engaging, other than the super battleships, but we'll get to that in a minute. Their biggest strength is that firepower. Their greatest weakness is the fact that they are basically floating targets. Their evasion is extremely low. Their speed is going to be some of the lowest out of all the classes. The nice thing is they do have some armor and good HP to make up for that, but they are, again, floating targets, so you're going to want those lighter ships to screen for them like we were talking about earlier. And they actually do have the best anti-air in class, other than the carriers. The carriers will run competing with them as well. Next is the super battleships. So what they do with the super battleships is take them and give them much more firing range, much more naval firepower, much more shore bombardment. The guns are bigger, everything's bigger. They're harder to make, they're better armored, they're better armor piercing. They're really the king of the sea. Their only downside, guys, is they're even bigger floating target than the regular battleships are. And with that decreased evasion and speed, they actually have a harder time hitting some of the lighter cruisers, even the heavier cruisers, heavy cruisers and destroyers that battleships, especially the modern ones, can actually start to keep up with. The next ship is your carrier, and the advantage of the carrier is the fact that they carry airplanes. And the advantage of airplanes is that the range that airplanes have during combat. The problem with air carriers is going to be that they are the biggest of all floating targets on the sea. They have the worst armor with the worst visibility. These guys are just waiting to be sunk if you don't protect them. So that's something you really have to be careful for. The best aircraft to use are their naval bombers because of their bonus damage against aircraft. If you'd like, you can also include some fighters on your carriers to give you bonus anti-air. And then finally, guys, we have the submarines. And the submarines' greatest ability is the fact that they are underwater, of course. And their ability to sneak in and sneak out without being detected is just the key to their usage, and that's historically, that's the way it is. There's not really anything special to note with the submarines. Just note that they're able to, Alright guys, that just about does it for my ship breakdown tutorial of what they're doing. If you have any questions or comments for me, leave them down in the comments section. If you like this video, please do subscribe, smack that like button, and as always guys, thanks for watching.